So afternoon, this is the Contensis 15.3 update. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Richard Saunders. I'm the Contensis product owner, and I help set the direction of the roadmap for Contensis. So let's get into today. We're going to be looking at some new features, and we want to start off with looking at the ability to save regularly used layouts and searches that you've done, known as private views, the ability to share those views with your colleagues and the rest of the organization, and the ability to create default views like a standard set of views for a project that can be used by anyone in your organization, that can be set at an organization level, and the ability to manage shared and default views centrally as a system administrator. So let's dig straight into Contensis and take a look at these new features. So let's head over to the entries listing screen and minimize my window. So here we are in entries. We're seeing a variety of content in our Leaf demonstration project, and you'll be familiar with being able to execute a search and find the content that you're looking for. So let's take a look at maybe some of the products that we have here. So I'm going to look at plant products and maybe the pots that go with them. So I've obviously narrowed down the entry listing screen now to the 33 products that are available as entries. But there's a little bit more info that might be nice to display. Each of our products has a product photo, it has a location in site view. So let's have a look at adding those options in. So you can use the manage columns to control which data you're represented in this grid. So let's have a look at maybe the primary image and maybe the URI. If you're used to using managed columns, you may have noticed this screen has changed slightly. We've reduced the number of fields that are displayed here in the left-hand column. Previously, we'd show you all the columns available for every content type in this list, but we've narrowed it down to the ones that are being filtered on and some of the fields that are already represented in your table. So that's represented by this detected drop-down. If you happen to be looking for something that isn't in that detected, when you do a search now, it will actually search across all the fields for you and locate it. We did this from a UX point of view, just finding things, and also from a performance impact. We noticed systems with significantly large number of content types that this could be kind of quite poor in rendering. So that's why we've sped that up. So let's add the URI fields. We've got a primary image. Let's put that for the title. And the URI after the title. I'm not interested in translation status. Let's hit save. Those images will load in shortly into this list. But here we are with the list now that we want to save that view for future use. So we can hit save view in the top of the screen, and we can now give this view a name. So I'm going to use an emoji, and I'm going to do products. And just going to put description, all products available on our site. So here we are now with a saved view, products at the top, with their image, their title, and their URL. And this is great because we can just recall this at a later date. So if I reset this search, so if I'm coming into the screen for the first time and I click on views, I can select products from the left-hand side and see that default layout that I'm used to seeing. This is great because if you're working on different types of content, or you're a different team working on different other content than the rest of your organization, you can just recall the layouts that you're used to using. Some of you may have previously bookmarked your layouts and structure like this, but now this comes to Contensis, so you can log on to any computer and be able to recall these saved views. We treat these saved views as a list of favorites. So here on the left-hand side, you can see this is titled My Views, but they're also favorites as well. So if I was to remove this item, not delete it, but just remove it from my views, we've got this idea that this list can be organized in the way that you want. So you might have created 20, 30 views, but at the moment you might only be interested in 2 or 3. So you can see some previous views that I've created. So I've got products I just removed, blog posts, and people. So let's add those to my view. And here I'm recalling all those favorites that I've previously created. And I can click through and I can see people with the photo and their title. I can go to blog posts and just see all the blog posts again with a primary image, URL, and the short kicker. And I can switch to products. So we think Save Views is going to be really helpful working on different types of content in Contensis, allow you as teams to be able to structure the views that you work on a daily basis. And that's the other point. When you've got a team of people working on the same type of content together, then wouldn't it be great if you could share these and make these available to the rest of your team? Well, you can. When I created this, I created it as a private view, just for my use. But if you've got permission, and this is a permissioned behavior, you can actually take products, and now I can make this available as a shared view. So when I click on update now, you'll see that on the left-hand side, the view has changed to a shared type, and that's available to any other user in Contensis within this project to add it to their favorites and reuse. And they do it this exactly the same way as we've just done to add my previous ones back into the list. So you simply click on add views, and you can see that this is a shared view on the left-hand side of products, and you can add it back into the list. So you can take a private view and make it public like you would potentially with a playlist on Spotify or on iTunes, and make it available to others in the organization. And this is a great way of sharing the kind of same views across your team. So that's at kind of team level and sort of on an individual basis. But what about you as an organization? If you've used Contensis Classic, you'll notice in the top right-hand corner of the screen, we've got a set of custom reports, and they're very generic, and each organization might want a slight variation of what that set of defaults can be. So we can do that. We can make them default. So let's maybe look at a quick search as a default view. So maybe we'll look for anything that has the workflow status of draft. So let's save a view and call this content in draft. I'm a bit of a fan of emojis, so let's put a pencil icon in there. It's being worked on. So firstly, I've got my private view called content in draft. And as somebody with permission, and this action of making default views can be restricted to a small number of people in your organization. You'll get the option to create as a default view. That's added a new section into this views panel on the left-hand side. And now that content in draft will appear to any logged in user to the CMS that has access to this project. And when they click on content in draft, they're going to see that same view. And you could do that for as many things as you want. So you could say, maybe I want stuff that's awaiting approval, or maybe I want a particular content type that is awaiting approval. So I don't know, tell me when there's a blog post that is blog posts aren't in the awaiting approval workflow. Let's just set it to blog posts that are due to be published. There aren't any at the moment, but if there were, let's save this as a new view. We could say blog posts waiting publishing. And again, I can create this as a default view so that everyone in the organization gets these by default. Now, if your organization has got 10, 20, 30, 40 different kind of default views, this list might start to become a bit cumbersome for yourself. So what you can do is you can choose to favorite these global views that are available. So you can simply add them to your favorites. And I'm going to select this blog post awaiting publishing here on the left-hand side and click on add to my views. And then you can see the global view that I've added to this list. You'll notice it's duplicated, and it isn't truly duplicated. I just made a copy of it to make it available for the organization. So I could just delete this one now. I don't need it anymore because it's available at a global level. And I'm just favoriting it because I don't necessarily want to see these default views. So there's lots of flexibility in the views panel, the ability to create many, many views, but only show a subset of those views for your personal usage, be able to share those views for other people in the organization, or to create a standard set of views that everyone will get, and yet still allow the control of what they see in their own views panel. Now, I mentioned some of these things are restricted to those with the relevant permissions. Well, they can be defined in the roles builder, as you'll see here. So for example, if I go to default entry view managers, these are the ones that can create a standard set of views for the entire organization. And you can see we have a views permission on the left-hand side. And the action here is that they can manage, so that's creating, updating, deleting, changing the owner of default entry views. So without that permission, you won't get the creator's default view option. And the same can be applied for if you want to allow people to manage shared views. So if Sai created a view and he decided to share it, I could potentially manage that view, delete it, update it, make a change to it as well. So we've narrowed down the permissions to controlling who can share, who can manage shared, and who can manage default entry views. So that's the roles and permissions side of shared views. You also have the ability to manage those shared views in a central way. So from the cog in the settings menu, you'll see project views, and these are the three views that exist as either global or as shared views. And I could change the ownership of any one of these views to take control. So if I left the organization here, Richard Saunders left, these views could be assigned to somebody else who is then responsible for them. So you can just do that using the change owner options. If I want to change the name, I can do that as well. So maybe I just want to say blogs awaiting publishing, and that can be updated from this screen. So anyone with the managed default views or managed shared views permission will get the appropriate options within this screen. So that is private views, shared views, and default views. A really flexible way of controlling what content you see in the entries listing, being able to recall content at any time with the layout that you previously set. So rather than me dive back into Keynote, the next area that we want to show you is ZenQL, or our advanced search screen here in Contensis. For those of you who've seen the 15.2 update, we introduced our own querying language called ZenQL. And that was available in our delivery API and our management API and security API to locate content or resources based on our own querying language? Well, we've brought that to the UI itself. So you can now go to the advanced search screen, and you can see that these views have been shared as well. So I'm just going to, for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to clean this up and just remove them from this list. Just so we can talk with a clean slate. So the slight difference between this screen and the entry searches, we've got no search panel to enter criteria. All we have is this kind of querying toolbar at the top. But we can carry out more advanced searches here. So if I was to look for, I don't know, let's look for the plant example that we did earlier. So I can say sys.content_type equals plant. Okay, that's great. We can do that in the basic entries listing screen. But I know right now that there is a plant within my product catalog that doesn't have a Latin name. Now, how would I go about finding that? Well, in ZenQL, I can combine the clause here with an and. So where sys.content_type equals plant and a field called Latin name is empty. So this is a function that we've created in ZenQL that allows us to look for anything that it has no value set against the field itself. So when I do this query now, I can find this Calitha, the plant that doesn't have a Latin name. And if I was to open up that entry, and I was to scroll down, you can see that Latin name is empty. I'm just going to put, don't know what the Latin name is. Any of you who do know it, you can add it in properly afterwards. But if I go back to that search now, you'll see that it couldn't find any search results because that Latin name is now populated. So this is a great way of beginning to understand the makeup of your content and where you might need to refine some of your content in content auditing and such, by being able to go down to that kind of granular level. We can do even more powerful searches in this screen. So I might want to understand as a user, what content have I modified recently? So I've already created a search here, which I've saved, and I've called it modified in the last week by me. So let's open that up and let's take a look at this query. So here you can see that I'm looking at the version of an entry. So I'm saying where the version has been modified, and we've got this special function here called current user. So that's the person who's currently logged in to the CMS, in this case myself, and where the version has been modified in the last week. So take the date and time now and subtract from now 1 week. And let's do a search for that content. Users. Oh no, this is the content I've just that I've worked on. So if I just change the order to updated date, you can see we've also changed the columns that we've ordered by, and that's been passed up to the ZenQL search bar to say order by the transition invoked in descending order. So we could now save that query and update that view like so, and that change and that ordering will take effect. So if I switch to, I don't know, logs awaiting publishing, and then go back to modified last week by me, you'll see that the order has been saved along with the query. And you can use this to locate other content. So like, what content have I created or published? So if you could say published by myself, and I haven't created much in here. So let's do the last year and search on that. And I've created these four plants. They've been published by me and modified in the last year by myself. So there we are, really flexible searches. Now, if you're not sure of the ZenQL syntax, we are going to be building some more helpers into this search toolbar at the top. As you saw, we had a list of field names and what have you. We are going to support you with writing these queries a little bit more. But in the meantime, you can see here that there are a bunch of keywords that you can use. So we've got and, ors, not, things between. You can scope your queries. You can use the various operators depending on the type of content that you're querying. And we have a bunch of supported functions as well. So some stuff around dates, like months and year, and also the relevant time period. And these functions are obviously supported in entries and users and groups. So that's the advanced search screen. But before we leave, I just want to show you another one. Just on the kind of accessibility front, a bunch of you might want to understand which images in your content fields don't contain alt text. So you can do that as well. So if you do, if I do this example of sys content type ID equals person, and in my case, photo dot alt text is empty, you can now find that these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 entries here don't have any alt text for these individuals. So I'm going to save this as a new view and call this people without alt text. Let's save that one. And if we were to look at one of these entries now, you can see this lady here, Maria, hasn't got alt text for that field. And you can do it for caption and any other kind of data as well. So this is empty function is really powerful for truly understanding some of your content. So that's the advanced search. Let's come out of here. Let's go back to Keynote and touch on a couple of other things. So we've just looked at advanced search. We created a bunch of different ZenQL queries, which are fully documented on contensis.com. We've got syntax highlighting to understand if your query's valid or not. And as I mentioned, we're going to add more helpers into this query toolbar to return things like lists of content types, return things like lists of users who've been working on content, as well as expand it where we feel is appropriate and depending on your feedback as well. One of the other options we've introduced to the content type builder and effectively into the editorial experience is the ability to set whether a field in the entry editor is collapsed or not. Now, this is especially important for content that may be irregularly updated or is available for some instances of content, but might not always be important to populate. It's also great when you find that there's an entry that contains lots and lots of long fields that you might not want to necessarily have expanded when you open them. So we'll look at that shortly. And also the ability to set default entries on a content type. So maybe you've got a blog that's always written by your marketing team and you want to set a default author for a blog post. We can do that through something like default entries. So let's go and take a look at those features. So if we head over to, let's go back to entries a minute. Let's look at blogs. Okay. So if we were to look at this blog post, we can see here that we have a bunch of fields. We've got this primary image, we've got thumbnail images, we've got authors, and we've got this post body. Now this post body is quite large, and once it's written, you might not want to kind of regularly go and update it. So how can we go about collapsing maybe some of these related blogs or this external promotion area? So when we open it up, it looks like this. Well, we do it in the content type builder, but before we dive over there, you can see we've now introduced into the tertiary action these two options, the ability to collapse all fields and the ability to expand all fields. So we can quickly narrow up the entry editor to find what you're looking for, or in turn, expand them all to see all the content in place. Let's get back to setting an individual value. So let's go to edit this content type. So here we are in the content type builder. Maybe let's look at the post body. Ooh, demo demons. We look at this field visibility. We can now say collapse this field editor when opening the entry editor. So if I put a checkbox in there, toggle that on, and publish that content type. Now, when we open up a blog entry, let's do this one again, and we scroll down to the post content, we'll see it's been collapsed. So here we are, the post body has been collapsed by default, and that's supported on all fields. In your content types, you can set it on any field type. And the expand and collapse will always affect the top level parent component. So for example, when you go into the post body, you have individual fields that can be collapsed, but the expand and collapse always deals with the parent accordion menu here. So that's expanding and collapsing fields within a entry. Makes it nicer for your authors who might be populating just a short subset of the content and not having to scroll so much within the entry editor. The other feature that I mentioned was about setting a default author for a blog post, for example. So how do we go about doing that? Let's go to edit this content type again. And if I head down to the author field, and this section here, you can see that the author field is looking at the content type of a person. And I have this new option called default entry. Now I can select any entry that is a person and make that the default author when the entry is created. So let's add Alfonso, hit save and publish. And we offer default values on lots of fields like text fields, number fields, and what have you. But things like the entry picker and the image field don't currently support defaults until this version. And if we create a new entry now, when we look down to our author, we can see our Alfonso is already kind of populated. And it's just taking one step out of the entry creation process. Obviously, if this person is different writing this blog, that can be removed and you can select somebody else. So it's not stopping you from changing it, it's just giving you a default value. We're going to bring the same support to images and assets, and that will come probably in the next release. But we're working through all those different fields and scenarios around setting default values to basically make content population easier for your authors. Okay, that pretty much concludes the demonstration of new features that are demoable in 15.3. But we do have another update around our image API. So for those of you who've been using the image API, you'll know that there is a restriction for images of up to 10 megabytes that can be processed by the image API to make them smaller, use the crop service, scale things down. We've recently updated the underlying framework that helps us manage that image manipulation, which is far more performant now since the upgrade. So we've been able to increase the file size restriction from 10 megabyte to 25 megabyte. And we're hoping that that will enable you to kind of use the image API more on larger assets whilst retaining the original kind of asset size So that's an update to the image API. So as a summary and a quick recap, we've touched on save views, the ability to create private, shared, and default views for a project, all of that being permissionable. The ability to create advanced searches using ZenQL and save those queries as save views as well. We've added support for expanding and collapsing fields as well as setting field default. And you can now set default entries on an entry picker field, making content population easier. And we've increased the file size for the image API from 10 megabyte to 25 megabyte, where images can be processed and making that a lot more performant. So as usual, if you've got any questions after the webinar, head over to Slack and get involved in the conversation. If you've got any improvements or suggestions or feedback, please share them on there. Your feedback goes into product board and helps shape our roadmap. And so we're really keen to understand what you guys want. And thank you.